So Keir Starmer wakes up one morning, probably hoping for a nice, quiet Monday where the biggest crisis is deciding whether to have tea or coffee, and instead finds himself in the political equivalent of being stuck between a rock, a hard place, and a very angry socialist with a megaphone. Because nothing says Happy New Year quite like your own backbenchers declaring ideological war over a Venezuelan dictator who's just been plucked from his bed by American special forces. Welcome to British politics in 2026, where the drama never stops and the irony is completely free. Let's set the scene. When Starmer walked into number 10, he made this big pledge about respecting international law. It was going to be central to his leadership, a guiding principle, the moral compass by which all decisions would be made. Very noble, very prime ministerial. The kind of thing that looks great on a press release and sounds fantastic in parliamentary speeches. But here's the problem with making sweeping declarations about principles. Eventually, reality shows up with a baseball bat and asks if you really meant all that. And reality just showed up in the form of Donald Trump doing what Donald Trump does best. Something absolutely wild that nobody saw coming, but in hindsight feels entirely predictable. Trump ordered U.S. forces to storm into Venezuela, grab Nicolas Maduro and his wife, and ship them off to America faster than you can say regime change. It was bold, it was dramatic, and it was about as respectful of traditional diplomatic norms as a bowl in a china shop. And now Starmer has to figure out what to say about it without either alienating America or setting his own party on fire. Spoiler alert, he's probably going to end up doing both. Because here's the beautiful mess Starmer finds himself in. On one hand, you've got international law, which is supposed to matter. Sovereign states, territorial integrity, all that good stuff that keeps the world from descending into complete chaos. On the other hand, you've got your closest ally just yeeting a head of state out of his own country and daring anyone to complain about it. And on the third hand, because apparently Starmer needs to be some sort of political octopus, you've got his own MPs absolutely losing their minds over the fact that he hasn't immediately condemned Trump with the fury of 1,000 suns. The Telegraph is reporting that this whole situation risks becoming a serious problem for Starmer, which is political journalism speak for this is already a serious problem and it's probably going to get worse. Our man Keir has spent considerable time and political capital trying to build a relationship with Trump. Not an easy relationship, because Trump makes everything difficult, but a workable one. The kind where Britain and America can still do business together, negotiate trade deals, and generally pretend that the special relationship is still special. But now that careful diplomatic balancing act is being tested by the fact that Trump just did something that, let's be honest, looks pretty sketchy from an international law perspective. You can't just rock up to another country, kidnap their leader, and expect everyone to be fine with it. Well, you can if you're America and you've got the military might to back it up, but that doesn't make it legal. Enter stage left, because of course they do, the Socialist Campaign Group. These are the MPs who wake up every morning and ask themselves what they can be angry about today. And today, they've hit the jackpot. Richard Burgon, who chairs this merry band of perpetual protesters, has come out swinging. He's demanding that Starmer stand up to what he calls Trump's gangster politics, which is a phrase that's going to get quoted a lot. Partly because it's catchy, and partly because comparing the US president to a mob boss is always going to make headlines. Burgon's argument is actually quite straightforward, if you ignore all the complications. He's saying Starmer should respond to Trump's actions exactly the way he would if Putin had done it, which sounds reasonable until you remember that Putin and Trump are not the same person, America and Russia are not the same country, and Maduro is not some innocent bystander caught in a crossfire. But details. Then Burgon drops what he clearly thinks is a mic drop moment. Either Keir Starmer believes in international law or he doesn't. It's binary. It's black and white. There's no nuance allowed. You either condemn Trump right now or you're a hypocrite who never cared about international law in the first place. It's the political equivalent of, are you going to finish that or can I have it? Except instead of food, it's Starmer's entire credibility on the line. And Burgon isn't alone in this. He's got backup. John Trickett, Kim Johnson, and Kate Osborne have all piled on, echoing his remarks and calling for Starmer to take a firmer line against Trump. They want condemnation. They want denunciation. They want Starmer to plant his flag in the ground and declare that this will not stand. Never mind the consequences. Never mind the diplomatic fallout. Never mind that Britain isn't exactly in a position to lecture America on foreign policy right now. What's fascinating about all this is the selective application of principles. These same MPs who are demanding Starmer uphold international law at all costs have been remarkably quiet about Maduro's own relationship with international law over the years. The rigged elections, the torture, the death squads, the systematic dismantling of democracy in Venezuela. Somehow, those violations of international norms don't seem to register quite as urgently. But Trump removing Maduro, that's where the line must be drawn. It's almost like the ideology of the person violating international law matters more than the violation itself. If you're a socialist leader doing questionable things, well, that's complicated, and we need to understand the context, and imperialism is bad. But if you're America doing something, that's automatically wrong and must be condemned immediately. The consistency is truly inspiring. Meanwhile, Starmer is trying to play three-dimensional chess while his own team keeps flipping the board. He's invested serious effort into this Trump relationship, not because he likes Trump necessarily, but because Britain needs America. Trade deals don't negotiate themselves. Security cooperation doesn't happen by magic. The special relationship might be more of a special acquaintanceship these days, but it still matters. And here's where it gets really tricky for Starmer. If he condemns Trump too harshly, he risks torching that relationship and making Britain look like an unreliable ally. America doesn't take kindly to being lectured, especially not from its junior partners. But if he doesn't condemn Trump strongly enough, his own backbenchers are going to eat him alive, and every statement he's ever made about international law is going to be thrown back in his face. It's a lose-lose situation dressed up as a political dilemma, the kind of thing that keeps prime ministers awake at night wondering why they ever wanted this job in the first place. Because no matter what Starmer does here, someone is going to be furious with him. He can prioritize the U.S. relationship, which means facing accusations of abandoning his principles, or he can prioritize his principles, which means damaging Britain's most important international partnership. There is no third option where everyone's happy and we all move on. What makes this even more complicated is that Starmer's leadership is already under strain. The Telegraph mentions he's had a difficult year, which is British political journalism speak for things have been an absolute disaster. Labour's had policy reversals, cabinet tensions, and more U-turns than a nervous learner driver. The last thing Starmer needs is a full-scale rebellion from his left wing over something he can't actually control. Because let's be clear about what actually happened here. Britain didn't storm Venezuela. British forces weren't involved. This was an American operation start to finish. Starmer's role in all this was exactly zero. He found out about it the same way everyone else did, probably scrolling through the news and choking on his breakfast. And yet somehow he's being held responsible for either endorsing it or stopping it, neither of which was ever within his power. This is the reality of being a smaller power in the international system. You don't get to dictate what America does. You can express opinions, sure. You can make your displeasure known through diplomatic channels. But at the end of the day, when America decides to do something, Britain's approval is nice to have, but not necessary. It's a humbling truth that a lot of politicians don't like to acknowledge, but it's still true. The Labour left doesn't want to hear that, though. They want grand gestures and principled stands. They want Starmer to stride onto the world stage and tell Trump he's out of line. Never mind that Trump would probably just laugh and do whatever he was planning to do anyway. The performance of principle matters more than the practical outcome. And this gets to the heart of the tension in Labour right now. There's a fundamental disagreement about what the party should be. Is Labour a party of government that has to deal with messy realities and make difficult compromises? Or is Labour a protest movement that exists to stand up for ideological purity regardless of practical consequences? Because you can't really be both. And right now, Labour is trying to be both, and it's tearing itself apart in the process. Starmer is trying to govern. That means maintaining relationships with allies even when those allies do things you find questionable. It means picking your battles carefully. It means understanding that sometimes the best response is quiet diplomacy rather than public confrontation. These are the unglamorous realities of actual power. But the Socialist Campaign Group doesn't want to govern in that sense. They want to make statements. They want to be on the right side of history. They want to be able to look back and say, we oppose this. The actual effectiveness of that opposition is secondary. What matters is the moral clarity, the unbending commitment to principle, even if that principle leads nowhere productive. So you've got Burgon and his allies calling Starmer a lame duck, which is deliciously ironic considering Starmer is the one who actually won an election and formed the government, while these backbenchers are shouting from the sidelines. But in their minds, governing requires standing up to Trump's gangster politics, and anything less is weakness. The term Maduropolis are being thrown around, and it's not entirely unfair, because let's look at what's actually being defended here. Maduro isn't some misunderstood democratic leader. He's a documented human rights abuser who rigged elections, ran death squads, and turned Venezuela into an authoritarian nightmare. Defending his right to remain in power isn't a principled stance, it's ideology overriding evidence. But admitting that would require acknowledging that sometimes Western intervention might actually be justified. And for certain corners of the Labor Party, that's an impossible concession. Western intervention is always bad. America is always the villain. Doesn't matter what the other side has done. The framework is set, and reality has to fit into it, not the other way around. Starmer probably knew this moment would come eventually. When you lead a party with such fundamental ideological divisions, collision is inevitable. He just probably hoped it wouldn't come quite this dramatically or quite this soon. But here we are, with his own MPs declaring war over a foreign policy situation he had no